Um, welcome. It is a pleasure to have all of you joining us today. I do see we are getting more participants coming in. Oh my goodness, I am so excited to have you all here. And in case you are in the wrong place, and I hope you're not, today is the Let's Blaxit panel event. It is a Black panel on working globally and how seeing the world leads to self-discovery. That is what we are here to talk about today. Also, this is a recorded event, so just wanted you all to know while you are joining us this morning. All right, let me introduce myself. We only have an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and truck along. But my name is Dr. Tiake. I am the CEO and founder of URep Abroad. And I started URep Abroad about 12 years ago as an undergraduate student living in China and Japan. And I'm sure if many of you have traveled the world, there's times where you find yourself being the only person that looks like you, right? And so I thought, you know what, I want to create an organization that will allow me to document my experience and let other Black students know that we're out here, okay? We're out here living our lives, we're out here traveling, and so URep Abroad, again, was just my opportunity to share those stories and to share my experiences. So outside of URep Abroad, just a little bit about me. I've traveled to about 14 different countries, and I've worked in international education for almost 15 years, I would say, with experiences in internationalization, global leadership, cultural studies. I'm a teacher at some universities, advising, mentoring, and I've had the pleasure of working at universities in the United States and also working abroad as well. So that's a little bit about me. And if you would like to learn more, I encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll see my link right there. And also my website, which is just my name, shantia.com. So please connect with me. I would love to meet all of you. All right. And our numbers are still going up, which is amazing. This is great. So a little bit about URep Abroad. So URep Abroad celebrates underrepresented educators and leaders in international education by intentionally uplifting and spotlighting their diverse experiences. And so our mission is really to just bring visibility to those diverse voices and experiences. And I really focus a lot on international education. So that could be advising and teaching and immigration and programming and events. There's a variety of different avenues under international ed. And so our goal is really to increase the number of those diverse workers in the field. So if this event gets you inspired and you decide, you know what, I want to work in international ed, then we did our job. So thank you. So there's a couple of ways you can get involved with URep Abroad. The first way you can do is subscribe to our newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter. We try to let you know what's going on in our community, what's coming up, what events, so please subscribe. And we also have a blog called Your Representation Matters. And so this is an opportunity for us to give a peek into those diverse communities in the field. We're always looking for people to blog. Also, it's our 12th birthday. Whoop. So if you want to give a gift, please give us a gift. Give us $12 to celebrate our 12th year. And you can do this through PayPal. And as I mentioned, we have a blog, and every month we have a different theme. So this month, February, of course, Black History Month. Happy Black History Month, everyone. We were all about highlighting that Blaxit experience. What are people doing in the field? Where are they going? Where are they traveling? What is it like? Well, March, we're really going to celebrate Women's History Month. So if you are a woman doing exciting work in international ed, or if you're someone that's willing to just share your experiences about traveling, we want to hear from you. And we invite all women, okay? Trans women, anyone who identifies as a woman, we want to hear your story. Also, men, if we have any male allies who want to discuss supporting gender diversity, we want to hear from you too. So please consider connecting with us for our March blog series. And the last thing that I'm just going to say about Europe Abroad, please help us reach our goal of 1,000 followers. We are on LinkedIn. We are so close. We're like in the 600s. And then also on our Twitter. That one needs a little bit more love. So please follow us on there. And again, we will just love to connect with you. So also, I have a partner in crime here, Miss Dawn Wooten, who will share a lot of our links in the chat box. So please make sure you are following the chat to grab those links and resources that we are going to share throughout this event. But that's enough about Europe Abroad. Let me tell you about this panel and how you as an audience can interact with us today. So there's several ways that you can do this. The very first way, we have a poll. So if you go ahead and look on your screens, there should be a poll button. So you can go ahead and click it. We want to know about the people in the room. Who are you? Where are you? What you doing? What's going on? I think the very first question on there is asking, how you feeling today? You know, you ready? You need some coffee? You feeling okay? Let us know. And also just a little bit about demographics. Where in the world are you right now? Have you already started your Blaxit experience? Are you just thinking about it? Which are you? Are you a business owner, an educator, practitioner, student? We want to know. So please complete our poll. Also ask questions. There is a Q&A section in here as well. Don't be shy, throw your questions in there. Audience members, you have the ability to upvote your favorite questions. So go ahead and smash that upvote button whenever we get the questions in. And then of course, get social, share your resources. If you're a business owner, I want to know, throw it in the chat. If you have other resources, upcoming events, I want to know, throw it in the chat. And in our post email, we will share these resources with everyone who attended today. All right. So those are ways that you can get involved. All right. Okay, so let's get this party started. Now that all of that stuff is out the way, I am so excited and so thrilled for all of you to meet our amazing panelists, who I would now like to invite to turn on your cameras. Let's see those beautiful faces. The very first person that I would like to introduce is Chrishan Wright. She is the founder of BLexit Global. Chrishan is an award-winning digital marketing expert, and Blaxit Global is a platform dedicated to empowering and inspiring members of the African diaspora. I'm sorry, I can't speak today, of the African diaspora, and really helping those who want to pursue a life abroad. So Chrishan is also the host and producer of the BLexit Global Podcast. So it's wonderful to have you here, Chrishan. Thank you for joining us. How are you and where are you in the world today?
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'm honored. I am joining you today from the beautiful Garden State. So I'm in New Jersey.
New Jersey's nice. I'm an East Coast girl, so I'm like,
it's
hey,
not
East Coast.
Portugal, but it's someplace.
That's all right. That's okay. So where's your next trip? Where are you going next?
Portugal in about 6 weeks.
Portugal in 6 weeks. All right. Very nice. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Next, we have Mr. Kevin Simpson. He is the founder of KDSL Global and Association of International Educators and Leaders of Color. And so this is a really amazing organization. He's built an amazing community of people and have served thousands of schools, educators, and leaders worldwide in over 25 countries. What? Kevin, thank you for joining us. How are you and where are you in the world?
I'm good, Shantia. Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you all for having this panel and this forum. Currently based in Dallas, Texas. I will acknowledge that I'm living and I move on stolen land. It's the land of the cattle, the Kickapoo, the Comanche, and the Wichita. So make sure I put that in there. as it's important to make sure when it comes to identity work that we're acknowledging all identities. So I'm based here, but in less than a week, I'll be in Dubai.
Very nice. Less than a week. Oh, the countdown is on.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And then, of course, we have our amazing, incredible, I'm a big old fangirl, so I'm up here smiling, but we have Elena Anderson, who is the co-founder of At Ease Solutions. And she's also the director of talent and culture at Academic Travel Abroad. And Elena, my goodness, she is a strategist with specialized expertise in business, in education, immigration, global workforce development, and global diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Elena has advised global organizations of all sizes and customized learning experiences that facilitate collaboration and belonging. So Elena, thank you for joining us. It is a pleasure to have you. And how are you? Where are you?
I am well. I am so excited about our conversation today. I am based in downtown DC. I'm at the headquarters of Academic Travel Abroad. So I'm very excited to be here and be connected no matter where we are.
Excellent. Thank you. So those are our amazing panelists. I'm so excited. We have a series of questions we are going to ask today. Also, I just wanted the audience to know, I did see the note about the poll not working. I am so sorry. I don't know what is going on with that. Hopefully figure it out. If not, that's okay. Follow us, on LinkedIn, and we know who came. Let us know. Give us a shout out. We'll find you. But all right, so let's go ahead. Let's start with getting on the same page, okay? Let's get on the same page about the term Blaxit, okay? What does this mean? So according to, Google and a little research and whatnot, so the term Blaxit, it was coined in the wake of the Brexit movement by academic, journalist, and human rights consultant, Dr. Ulysses Burley III. And so it's only been 2 years since this term has really come out and become popular. And I'm sure you've noticed it created a massive movement on social media. So a lot of people are hearing this term Blaxit, Blaxit, Blaxit. So I want to start with Chrishan. Can you share with the audience, what does Blaxit mean to you? And what was the motivating factor that led you to go international?
Oh, that's a great question. For me, Blaxit means freedom, agency. It is something for me that is deeply personal, which is, kind of why I created the platform that I did. To give you some background, I created Blaxit Global in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. And while I was on my personal journey, I had started it in 2017. I did my first international solo trip to New Zealand. And it was something that was on my heart ever since I was a little girl growing up in the Bronx, but only was able to make it a reality many decades later. And when I did that, I felt so free. It was so transformational. And I won't go too much into it because I know there are other moments where what I journeyed will become more relevant. But I really discovered who I was on that trip and surprises along the way. And so that's when I made the decision that I wanted to live abroad. But my children were smaller at the time. And so I just knew that it would be a little longer tail. And so in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, at the social unrest that was going on about the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, I was really getting into a deep and dark space emotionally. And ultimately, I knew I had to channel and redirect that energy into something positive. And so while I knew I was on this journey for many years at that point, and I had actually just come back from a trip to Australia and New Zealand in February of 2020, I said, you know what, let me just create this platform. Maybe there are people like me, maybe there are Black people like me who are tired and frustrated and fed up and know that there's more. Not sure what it is, but it's more. And so fast forward to where we are now, thousands of people in our community, and the podcast and all the accolades later. I'm just glad that the message is reaching so many people.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I most definitely can relate to just the feelings that I've had, being a Black person living in the United States, watching the things that have occurred in most definitely the most recent years. So I understand that. So thank you so much. Thank you. Kevin, what about you? What does Blaxit mean to you? And what was the motivating factor that led you to go international?
Yeah, great question. Like Chrishan said, I think definitely the first, word that pops out for me is freedom, liberation, choice. Just if I think about words that just resonate with me as it relates to that. And I also think Black exit, and for me, it's thinking about my soul, my mind, my body, and thinking about place. And if the place that I am in is not feeding me, not nurturing me, then I'm questioning and I'm wondering what else is there out there? What else and where else is there? Where do other opportunities lie and exist? Are there others who are having that same, which I love, like Chrishan was saying, she's created that community, that network of others. Are there others who are having these same inklings and thinking about this? And for me, I remember a lot of discussion even before 2020 about the return home. And so there are a lot of folks I knew who had went to Ghana. I know folks when I lived in the United Arab Emirates who there was a surge of a Black population in Abu Dhabi. You saw that in essence being captured in social media where you see thriving Black women, Black men who are professionals who are working overseas. And so I think a lot of, when I think of, Blaxit, that for me, that's sort of what resonates and what sticks out. So I first went overseas, I'm gonna date myself. When I was 19 years old, I was a sophomore at Michigan State University. And I literally there was a Young Sisters and Brothers magazine, it was out back then, dating myself. And they had on the cover of the magazine, win a free trip to Africa. And, open to the page and old school, fill out the form and mail it back in. Well, I did that in January of that year, that was 96. And lo and behold, a month later, I get a call saying, is this Kevin Simpson? You're the winner of the free trip to Africa. So my first international experience happened when I was 19 over spring break. My cousin and I, she was a teacher then in New York, her and I went to Benin. And so that sort of planted the seed, being outside the US. I had never had a passport then. Seeing, learning, listening, hearing language, hearing French, the Gambi village. And if you've seen it'll come back to me, it's a Netflix special on food. I literally season 1, I was like on the floor because everywhere he went in Benin, I had been. And so that was sort of the beginning, the first seed that was planted for me. I think the other sort of factors, fast forward years later, I had a mentee, Lenny, he's from Pontiac. And I remember him saying, I'm going to teach overseas, I'm going to Sudan. And then I met somebody, another brother who was in my grad program, who was like, after I finish this summer, I'm going back to London. And so to see and hear others who looked like me saying that they're going to work and live in other places really was a motivating factor. And so in 2004, I started to look for opportunities. I was an educator. I've been an education leader in Virginia for a bit. And then I just applied and had an opportunity to work overseas in Vientiane, Laos. Took it, had a couple different offers, and sort of went with the opportunity where I felt would probably be the least likely for me to go and move. And it was amazing. And 17 years later, still hooked.
Oh my gosh, that sounds incredible. I cannot believe you won that trip. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And Elena, what about you? Like, what does Blaxit mean to you, and how did you end up in, the field?
I would say one word with Blaxit is that it's an option. Just similar to what Kevin and Chrishan said, we now have option thanks to social media and technology. We can look before we leap, and we have the option to have additional economic opportunity, additional freedoms, just the space to figure it out. Before, there was the mindset as, well, the US is the best country, therefore you're in the best place, so you have to make the best of it. And we've learned that in so many other factors and indicators, we're not the top of the list anymore. We're not at the top of the heap when it comes to infrastructure, education, economic opportunity, especially for Black Americans and people of color. We have options now. And so we can connect with nationals all over the world, learn about their experiences, make plans, just like my co-panelists are about to jump on planes into different countries. They're able to know before they go. Before, it's not this deep void mystery. And so I love it. I love this. I love the fact that I think for decades, we have been taken for granted as being stuck in the US. We have just been assumed that we're going to stay in the country where we're born, where with other nationals, mobility is just part of life. You move, you look for jobs wherever you can find a job. You look for education and institutions wherever the best fit is in whichever country. So the borders are no longer limiting. So we have a choice. And I love the fact that I'm in this space. Is so fascinating because I feel like I'm right on the sidelines seeing this movement happen. It started with language study. I picked up Spanish in high school. I was super shy. And my teacher said, okay, you go to college, you need to sign up for study abroad. So I knew to start asking about it in my first year. And I went right after I finished my freshman year to study in Mexico, and just being able to be outside of the border and learn. It was for language, but it was so much more eye-opening as far as how I was perceived. I was able to be an American or be viewed as something more than just my race. So we'll talk about that later, but I am really excited about this movement and what it represents in choice and options.
Amazing. Thank you. I love that you said it gives you an opportunity to have choice. I don't think we talk about that enough. I think that's amazing. Thank you. And everyone, I just would like to say, I'm so sorry that you could not see our panelists in the beginning, but I think now that that issue has been solved. So thank you all so much for your patience as we navigate technology, technology. All right, so just throw a little data at you. I'm gonna hit you with a little bit of data. So according to the 2020 Open Doors report, which is a comprehensive information on US and international students within study abroad and travel. They reported that there has been an increase in underrepresented students studying abroad. However, only 6.4 of those students studied abroad, and we're going to use 2018 and 19, which of course was pre-COVID, which you'll see over here on this chart. But then that number decreased to 5.5 in 2019 and 2020, again, pre-COVID, so it wasn't COVID that triggered this decrease. And from these numbers, I would assume that the number of Black professionals working in study abroad, those advisors, those different professionals, that's even smaller, that's even smaller. So Kevin, I'm gonna start with you. How did you end up working in international education, and how did it impact your overall professional career?
Yeah, so my start again was 2005, and I went through. So I learned the brother who told me that he was going back to London. That was sort of my dig and my opportunity. So him and I had lunch. He introduced me to various different agencies that you can apply to, where you can post your resume and your CV. You can find out about opportunities to teach and lead overseas. And so I just, started that process. And then I did some face-to-face, some virtual interviews. I attended a couple of different fairs, because again, this was all new to me. I had never heard, no one had ever said anything to this about me. I hadn't heard it in undergrad. I hadn't heard it in just general talk. It was basically go to college, get a job. I mean, that's sort of like the framework that was sort of set up. And, this just introduced so many, it just literally introduced the world to me. So it was just like, do you want to go to South America, Central America? I mean, just the world. And it was like, where do you want to go? And trying to narrow down exactly where, when did I want to go? Because it was like opportunities were coming in left and right. It's like once you register, you're like being bombarded with, because they'll look at your, resume and invite you to interviews and things like that. And so I think that was that beginning for me in 2005. And then over time, once I came back to the US, so I came back to the US a few times. This is actually my third time back in the US. I set up a consulting company. And I said, because I think just those experiences I had over those 2 years in Asia, I didn't want to end, but also I'm like, I want other people to know about this, so it's like, how can I share this out that, from what I learned, and which is a reason why, serving on these panels, doing podcasts, so people know and are aware of what's on offer. And so then setting up the consulting company originally was in Washington, DC. So I was back in the DMV area. I lived in DC, Virginia, Maryland, shout out to the East Coast. And I had went back overseas after about a year to Qatar on a short-term project, came back and then went to Dubai. And that was sort of my longest stint. I stayed in the United Arab Emirates for 8 years. And I set up a company there too. And so just trajectory-wise, that became my base for the years. And so I traveled from Dubai and worked from there with different international schools and entities over the course of 8 years. And so when I think about just growth, learning, entrepreneurship, taking risk, again, setting up a company in a country where I didn't know that much about, but they very much embraced entrepreneurs and were open to that idea. So it just went sort of from a teacher into an entrepreneur and just finding mentors and advisors that were not only in the UAE, but around the world. So it did, and it continues to do a lot just for my career. And again, for me, it's, this period in my life is all about like just legacy and giving back. And so how can I share and make sure others who want to, have this type of pathway are set?
I love that. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Chrishan, how did you end up doing what you're doing with the BLexit Podcast? How did you get here?
That's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier, it was, all the things that were going on in 2020, but I had an idea to start a podcast quite a few years earlier. I was actually in a competition in New Jersey, had a different idea. And then a friend of mine who is the host of the Sisters Connect podcast started doing a course, which, 2020, that's what everybody was pretty much doing with their free time, baking and taking courses. And so I was like, oh, she was like, oh, you should try this. And then I was like, I don't know, what am I going to talk about? And then I went to bed and I knew it was either going to be about one of two things, like finances or, Blaxit. And so it came to me and I didn't want it to be limiting because I know as members of the African diaspora, our spores have been sprinkled all over this world. And so there's no place that we can't inhabit if we are so called. And so I didn't want it to be where I couldn't talk to someone who is from Canada, who relocated to Germany, or someone who grew up in Mexico, who's now, living in New Zealand or Ghana, or whatever. And so I wanted to have that opportunity and that freedom. And while I've been on these, journeys to different countries, I oftentimes travel solo. I've done a few group trips, but I had never really encountered Black expats. So as I think about it now, because actually one of our members asked during, we have these accountability calls and things like that in the group. And she was like, wow, did you know any of these people? And I said, honestly, no, with the exception of one that was a former coworker. It was weird to think that in a time of social distancing, where we couldn't move freely because of the pandemic, that I was able to connect through the power of the internet, and Elena mentioned that earlier, to have these rich conversations with people who are sharing, their experiences along their pathways and discovering new things about themselves, discovering and creating opportunities that they couldn't realize in their home country. Most of them are from the United States, but to pursue entrepreneurship or academic endeavors or anything, just the freedom that comes along with that was empowering for me, and it lifted me during, and continues to lift me during this time. And I know I'm on the precipice of realizing my Blaxit, and my daughter graduates high school next year. But just being able to open the door and inspire people and empower them, to give them the cheat code and see that you can clearly hear from someone's story how they're demystifying the planning process, is really powerful and empowering. And so where I started in 2020, everybody knows my number one country is New Zealand, but I had to pivot because, I talk about it in the show, between my age and things like that, it was looking like that wasn't going to be an easy transition. And so I've now been on the journey of finding a new country, also in part because my daughter expressed some reluctance in me being 28, 29 hours away. And so that, I think, is the beauty and the freedom of choice and opportunity. And so, I think that I feel very fortunate that the platform has resonated with so many people, and to make these connections and learn, all these other avenues that people can utilize to pursue their dreams. It is possible.
Amazing. Thank you. Yes, it is very possible. And Elena, I don't know if I ever told you this, but you were actually the first Black woman that I encountered in international education that was just doing her thing. It was at the NAFSA conference, and I actually asked you to read my resume. Wow. Yeah, it was about like 12 years ago. I was like, can you read my resume? I'm a new professional. And you were like, listen, you opened up my whole world. You like kicked it open. Kool-Aid Man did, bust down the walls. So I would love to know, like, how did you end up doing what you're doing in your career?
Wow, you took me back, girl. Time does fly, and I would say it was an evolution, really. It started with, again, just trying to pick up an extra language in high school, evolved into my first study abroad experience in another country, having an amazing time doing that, and realizing that when I was trained, or, when they coach you and prepare you before you travel, that messaging wasn't catered towards me. It wasn't tailored towards students of color traveling outside of the US. It was just designed around, white students and their expectations and their perceptions in Mexico, which is very different. And I realized, hey, when I travel, I'm viewed differently. I'm viewed more positively, actually, outside of the US. It drove me back to study more in Latin America and within the region, and learning the connections between the diaspora and also just different cultural nuances. I was interested in the migration of individuals, what influence the movement of people, if it's war, if it's economic opportunities, or just cultural, political activities that inspired the movement. And then I actually wanted to be more academic and do the research, but then I started hearing the stories through various internships, and I wanted to get in on the action. I wanted to be part of the process and to be that face that I didn't see represented at that time. So I really got into the immigration side of international ed soon, just before the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And when I advised individuals from North Africa, the Middle East, they would ask me questions that they would not ask my white counterparts. And that was, how would I be perceived in the US? Am I safe? in the US? Is my family safe? And I realized there's something unique that Black Americans have to offer in spaces where we are supporting the transition of individuals across borders. And so it drove a lot of career choices, and it also influenced my idea of being an entrepreneur and providing services for organizations that were either afraid to talk about this or just did not understand the compliance side of it. So I really, I feel blessed in being able to look back and see like the evolution of the career and how it led me, just bringing my full self and being very open and authentic, and how I advise individuals allowed me to support organizations and mobilizing their whole workforce and helping people realize, hey, it's not just about permits and taxes, it's people and the reality that how they may look or how they perceive could impact their experience. And it could impact the bottom line of an organization who's sending that employee abroad. So it's something that I've been very passionate about, not just focusing on compliance, but also focusing on the human aspect of any transition.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So what I admire about each of you is your willingness to be the voice in the field by supporting other Black Americans or other underrepresented groups and finding that courage to teach abroad or work abroad or travel abroad. And so, Elena, I'm just going to come back to you really quick again, because you do significant work, in the U.S., encouraging people to get out, to go abroad. And I'm really curious about like the types of fear that you've heard and what have you said to alleviate some of those fears? I know we received a question in the Q&A that says, as Black folks, how do I handle the fear of leaving what I know? For example, flying a plane across seas and experiencing a culture where I don't know the rules or how to protect myself. How would you answer that? And then also, what are some other fears that you have heard in international ed?
Yeah, the number one question I would get when talking about a destination would be, and again, right now I work with professionals with established careers. It's the number one question would be, is it safe? Is it safe for me and for my family, especially if it is a diverse family in and of itself? And what if something happens? So safety, not just public safety, but the perception. And I would always point out that it's not the US. There is this realization that the US has its own systemic challenges with how it treats melanin, period. And I usually end up with a point blank conversation. Like, if other countries, even when there is discrimination or a difference in treatment, it may be linked to class or the assumption that you're a national of somewhere else. It's a different lens that everyone else in the world looks at you. And it's just a mindset shift that has to happen when preparing individuals. But I do encourage questions like that outright so that you can just get it out there in the open. And oftentimes I talk to the spouse that is going with that professional, and sometimes there are teenagers involved or older children, just really answering those questions. And the safety is not just reflecting on how I'm perceived, but am I safe if I need medical treatment? Am I safe if I do run into challenges with the law? What about corruption or things of that nature? But it is all grounded into, will I be treated fairly? And will I, encounter some incident where it's just not physically safe? And so we're just conditioned, and it's really oppressive. And I wanted to point out one of Kevin's comments where leaving the US is freeing of just being freed of knowing that you are assumed to be negative or a threat, but just sometimes the stares or the questions come from curiosity rather than just an accusation that you've done something wrong. So it's a total mindset, but I make sure to just get it out there in the open for that honest conversation.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. And Chrishan, from your podcast, I'm sure you've heard so many different stories and experiences from people, around the world. Have you noticed any common themes, concerns that people have shared with you?
Yeah, I think some of them have been, I would say the biggest fear is usually financial. People are worried about, well, how much money do I need? Or feel that they need to have, tens of thousands before they make that jump. Healthcare, of course, is one that's ever present. Sometimes people have a fear of planes and things like that. But I think, I don't want to, poo-poo anyone's fear. It's realized to that person. But a lot of it goes back to what Elena said about mindset is, have you had a time in your life where you faced your fear and how did it work out? And so if it worked out, then guess what? Maybe you utilize that as a frame of reference to take that first step. And maybe it doesn't mean halfway around the world. Maybe it just means going across to Mexico or Canada or Costa Rica, maybe the Caribbean, just go on a little trip, get your feet wet. There's definitely concern about anti-Blackness, largely because of the framework in which we have existed within the confines of the US. And so when you're able to go into a different part of the world and be seen as a human being, first and foremost, it just feels different. And that's the part that is exciting to me. That's the part that I always look forward to. Everyone I've spoken to on the podcast, when they come back home to visit family or friends, they say when they get off the plane and they get into the line to come back in, they feel the weight come right back on them. It's palpable. And so that's what I mean. Like when you're able to go outside of the confines of the United States and be able to move about and encounter people and learn from them and be open in a different way and not have to be worried about the next microaggression or someone calling the police because you look different or you look like you don't fit in. Or quite honestly, one of the reasons why I want to leave is because the proliferation of guns in this country. I was pulled over, I talk about it in the podcast, I was pulled over twice on my first trip to New Zealand. And it didn't even, they drive in on the other side of the road and kilometers. And my New York City lead foot was just, adjusting in the wrong way. But they were so polite. And as I got pulled over, they explained why and what happened. And I totally was in the wrong. And then when I went to my Airbnb host, he's like, did you notice they don't have guns? And it didn't occur to me at first. And I was like, well, the second time it happened, I realized they didn't have guns. But it was like, I didn't even have that fear. And he said, he said, quite honestly, and he was Maori, he said, they won't kill you like they do in the US. Like I've had so many times where I've traveled where people are like, do you have to go back? And because of how the other world now perceives America and how we have created this idea of what we are, but the reality is for many of us, it's very different. And so the people I talk to on the podcast are actually able to live out their American dreams in another land. And that's the part, like if you can bet on yourself and that, yes, you might have been educated and reared in the United States in your home country. And those are all good things. Those helped shape who you are today. But those things are largely transferable and you can exist and, dare I say, thrive in a different land if you bet on yourself. It is possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love watching those different articles by, I think, Travel Noir. They're always like, I saved $5,000 and I'm like, oh, how? Let me read this.
Yes, yes, it's not as expensive as
Right.
one would think.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a third of what you're paying to live
Mhm.
in the United States for comparison. So it definitely is
Mhm.
possible.
Absolutely. I was living like a queen when I was living in China. I was getting my clothes custom made. I was going to Shanghai and partying on the weekends. Like, yeah, I'm out here living. So yes. Kevin, I know that, of course, you've built, as I mentioned, an incredible community to support Black leaders and educators. And so I wanted to ask you, what have you found surprise people the most once they leave the United States and start their life internationally? What have you found?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that folks find is that there is a community outside the US. So example, 2014 December, and I don't know if anyone on the call had an opportunity to get one of these tickets. Etihad had $125 tickets to Abu Dhabi from all US, destination, wherever they flew from the US. So many people, especially
Let me
Black.
get on your mailing list. Whatever you following, because you know all the contests. All right, can you send it to everybody?
Look, so many people got those tickets. So when I was living there then, I was getting so many emails like such and such is coming there, such and such is coming. And again, it's that whole visibility. How do you make this visible? But I think the biggest thing people want to know, is there a community, wherever I'm going? That's something that's constantly asked of us at ALOC. ALOC is one of the groups, and we're pretty in terms of open, so it's like more BIPOC focused. But then we also there's another group called Brothers and Sisters in International Schools. And that's where people, post and share opportunities to teach, learn, lead abroad, things around like travel. But I think that's the biggest thing. People want to know, is there a community? Because in the international education or international school ecosystem, there's been this surge in the last couple of years of, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice statements. People want to know, is it performative? Are they real? Because we've always got that question of, I went on the website, but I didn't really see anybody who looked like me. So even before even applying or engaging in the process, people want to know, are there others? And so our constant thing is like, yes, here are the communities, let me add you here. Here's such and such who is, here. You're thinking about going to, to Africa. Let me link you with someone who I know who is there. So I think for us is once we find people who are interested, it's like, how can we connect them so that they know that there is this community that's out here, that's open, that's sharing resources. We want you in the community. How can we ensure that you thrive? Like Chrishan said, we don't want people to survive. We want you to thrive, and to ensure that what it is you want to do within the ecosystem is achieved. And so I think that's the biggest thing for us is making sure that people know that there's a community that exists, and making that visible. I think that's a lot of the work that we do is like, how do you amplify those voices? And so people see and hear from others who look like them, because that representation is major, and we hear that quite often. Just to be aware that there's a community, or am I going to be the only one? Sort of like this outlier, feeling alone.
Excellent, thank you, Elena. Chrishan, is there anything else that you would like to add to what Kevin said regarding, what surprised people once they get out there and see the world?
I just wanted to add to Kevin's comment, like in knowing about communities that are out there, because it's the first question is, are there other Blacks there? And then, the Kevins would say, yeah, but are they Black? And so it's also that question of, is it my Black? And I just, when he said that, it resonated with me. I was just passing through Amsterdam, and I remember seeing so many Black people speaking Dutch. And I walked up and say, hey, are you my people? And it was just so amazing that, one, they acknowledge, the community within, the community, and they just absolutely knew why I was walking up asking that question, that they understood me. And again, like Chrishan mentioned, they asked me the same question. Hey, so you want to stay now that you know that there's a community here? And I'm like, I'll think about it. So, we have more options, and, just making those baby steps and realizing that there's so many connections that can be made. It's out there.
Excellent. Chrishan, is there anything else you want to add?
I would say the biggest surprise, what I found is people wish they had done it sooner or earlier. And then I think the other one is sometimes, and I've had this happen with a few people that have left, they've gone to a country that they thought was going to be a fit for them. And then they either went to another country and had a better experience or came back to the US for some time. So it was just kind of like that mental prep and work for them to understand that, hey, you know what, it's okay if you wind up coming back to the States, if it doesn't work out, if you need to regroup. My moderator, for example, lives in Orvieto, Italy, and she tried 3 times. And each time she went over to Italy, there was something that was like off. Maybe she was in a different part of the country, didn't have enough finances, but the 3rd time was a charm. And she found, you get in where you fit in. And she's been thriving ever since. And so I think the biggest surprise is that the path isn't linear. You have the ability to control, how fast or how slow you move in this. And so I think once you do it or put your mind to it, you'll surprise yourself in this process.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I think we can all agree that our panelists are incredible, very inspiring. And I'm sure there was also a moment in your life where you had that like aha moment, I like to call it. So I'd like to ask everyone, the panelists, the audience, to just have a pause for a moment. And I want you to just take a look at this quote that I have posted by James Baldwin, who is an American writer. And he really wrote heavily about the racial injustice in the United States, in the Black experience. And as a result of those experiences, he decided that he was going to live abroad. I believe he lived in France, I think, maybe for about 9 years or so, I believe, because he felt that, his attempts to deal with racism and throughout our political systems and our social systems, they were really met at that time with, and I'm quoting, failure, elimination, and rejection. So he was just tired, y'all. So he did have this quote that I posted here, and I want you to all let that resonate with you. Just think about it. If you can share in the comments, panelists include it. How does this quote resonate with you? How does it make you feel? So go ahead, just think about that. Feel free to throw things in the comments. I want to be very sensitive to the time, and I want to make sure I roll over to the Q&A, which is why I'm asking you to write your answers in the comments. So I'll leave the slide up for a second, but we do have a question here from Jocelyn. Thank you so much for your question, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it. And this is for all of the panelists. She says, I'm proud to say that I started a small business a few years ago, and it has become successful and lucrative for myself and my business partners. Get it, girl. Yes. We are fully remote, so I can live anywhere, although time zones, of course. So what are some advantages and drawbacks of living abroad, but working remotely in the US? Panelists, would anyone like to answer this question?
I can go first. I would say for me, especially since everyone I speak to is in a different part of the world, the challenge is usually time zones. And especially if you're dealing with anything with currency. So knowing that currency fluctuates and allowing for time for things to kind of transfer and move, those have been some of the things that I've heard.
I would also reiterate with time zones. I think the US is kind of isolated in its time zone. When you are in other parts of the world, you actually feel closer to other times. From an infrastructure perspective, I think depending on the region you're in or in the country or locale, your Wi-Fi access may have moments of instability if the country is involved in rolling blackouts. And, or you may have to, if you're set up long-term, you may have to look into setting up a generator or just making sure you have a consistent source of power. And setting up utilities, you just call a company. There's just more automation on the US side of things that may not be there. There may be other practices that may not be the norm in the US, like tipping involved when you're trying to get set up. But this is a moment where finding your people and learning before you go, you'll be able to prepare yourself for setting up shop in another country. And again, it depends if it's remote or in a more urban setting, but every place is different. But you do want to check out the infrastructure that you need to make your business run smoothly.
Thank you. And everyone, please feel free to continue to add your questions to our Q&A. And also, I am keeping an eye on the chat. We have about 4 more minutes, so let's try to squeeze in a couple more. And I do see, just taking a really quick glance at the poll, just to share with everyone who's in the room. It looks like that 40% of you are thinking about a Blaxit, which is awesome. 30%, you're like, I'm already gone, I'm out bad. Yes, 30%. And then the other 30, there's no Blaxit, but you travel a lot. That's where I am, although I am trying to get to that Blaxit at some point. In terms of where we are in the world, the majority, we are in North America. We have someone from Spain. I'm sorry, I did not mean, listen, to human is to error. Is that what they say? Is that the quote? My apologies. I've missed some places, but the majority of us, 90%, are in North America, and we are business owners, 20% practitioners. So that's staff, advisors, coordinators. We have such an amazing group of people in the room. So please drop your questions into the Q&A or chat, so that way we can, get those answers for you. Let's see here. I do want to say that, oh wait, we just have something new here. We do have someone just sharing that they're in the process of, I believe your Blaxit, I think that's what you're saying. I have my place in CR and it's just planning and permanent exit. That is excellent. And also I see someone saying they look forward to, knowing about themselves outside of the American lens, outside of the US lens. And that is impactful. I most definitely had that happen to me.
I have to agree. I'll jump in there. I think someone said earlier, I've never felt more American outside of the US than in the US. I'm gonna keep it real. The groups and the dinners and the social events, it was country with the country where you came from that tended to come up. And yeah, so I remember, I think about a couple years ago, I had wrote a poem and it said, in the year of yes, we can, I would enter a land of opportunity. Wasn't that supposed to be America? I found life and made a plan in the desert. And so I was referencing sort of like Dubai, living in the UAE, but also this identity of, again, people sort of see you and sort of say where you're from, and you're, at the same time, attempting to say who you are, so they'd be like American, and I'll be like, I'm Black, but that's just me, but yeah, so that was that constant interaction with others, Yankee, there's so many words that I could think of in terms of context that I've been called, or people attempt to say, tell you who you are.
Right, exactly. Oh my goodness. I remember I lived personally, I lived in China for almost 2 years. And there was this one point, I'm just living my life, I'm meeting interesting, cool people. And I'm like, oh man, I feel so free. This is crazy. Like, I didn't have to think about, like, if I see a cop, like, oh, I'm automatically tensing up, or if I'm in certain places and you walk into the place, it's more like, oh, hey, like, we're really curious about you. Like, it just felt so welcoming and warm, and I had an incredible time. That was my experience in China. I know some people have shared other stories, but I've had an incredible time. But yeah, so it's 9:59. I just have one more slide after this one, but I do want to say, thank you all, my panelists. You have been incredible. It's been amazing to have you all here. Chrishan Wright, Kevin Simpson, Elena Anderson, you are like goals, hashtag professional goals, living life goals. I love it. And of course, just everyone who has joined us today, I just want you to know that in a few days, I will send out a post email, And in this email, I will include different resources that we shared, that we found in the chat, or that our panelists shared with us, their links, their websites, so you can connect with them. There's also a survey. I know people feel some type of way about surveys, but listen, I'm trying to get better. All right. We just a 2-person operation. Okay. So please do the survey. It's only 4 required questions. You can just boop, boop, boop. So please complete that. And of course, if you have a business or a company or resources, events that's coming up, let us know in the chat, email us. I'm here to spread the word, okay? So please let us know. And of course, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn because we need the followers. So I'm going to go ahead and end it with a Maya Angelou quote, an amazing American poet. And she says, "Perhaps travel cannot prevent bigotry, but by demonstrating that all people cry, laugh, eat, worry, and die, it can introduce the idea that it will try and understand each other. We may even become friends." And that is why I personally try to encourage all of you to get out there and see the world, because we control our narrative. We tell our stories. We don't want other people saying what the Black experience is like, what Black people is like, what the media says. No, it's up to us. So let's get out there, make those connections, everyone. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. And a recording of this will be emailed to you as well. Everyone, thank you, panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. All right. And with that, we end our webinar, our panel. Thank you.
Thank you.